Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the Pattern Design Circle podcast. I'm so excited to have Megan Nodecker here with me from Pip and Pin. And today we're going to be chatting about seasonality of selling knitting patterns. So super excited to have you here, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's super fun to have Megan because we've kind of become friends over the last couple of years. We check in with each other a fair bit, and so it's fun to have these connections in the knitting industry that make it feel less alone.
Yeah, I think it was last year, or was it even longer than that you had me on the podcast or in the Pattern Design Circle or something. And then yeah, ever since then we've at least every couple months.
Yes,
We
sometimes more
have
often.
a little chat, which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was last year, 2022, when I featured one designer every month.
Right.
And so,
Right.
yeah, that replay episode came up on the podcast here this year.
Yeah.
So it would have been just months ago. Yeah. So if you're interested in checking out that episode, go ahead and scroll back. But the reason we're having this conversation is because we actually just had one of our catch up calls yesterday just to chat, and we were talking about seasonality of selling patterns, and part of that is because of the month of December.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and so I think like the expectation typically would be December should be a big month for knitting, right? Because it's winter time and people are knitting for gifts and things like that. But I can speak to my experience. I know we've kind of had similar experience. What have you seen
Mm.
in sales in December specifically?
Garbage for the most part. I will say, there is an event, the Indie Design Gift Along, that does provide a bunch of sales kind of at the end of November, beginning of December. But after that, it really does drop off because, like you said, you think people are knitting, and people are knitting. They are knitting a lot, but they're not. They're not knitting things for themselves. They're knitting gifts, right? And I don't know about you, but me personally, I don't have a ton of uh ex- like accessories, like quick and easy things. I do mostly sweaters. So I find that especially, like, people aren't buying sweater patterns for themselves. They're not buying things to make for themselves. They're doing kind of things for other people. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
and
know that you
were you gonna
go
say
ahead.
something?
No, I was gonna say, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I feel like there's also like once people are knitting stuff for holidays, for gifts, etc., that's like they've already have the pattern. Like maybe they've already picked it out earlier.
Mhm.
A lot of people have even started gift knitting in November. And so my theory is that folks aren't buying new patterns for their gift knits in December. That like
No.
I have released patterns that are specifically meant for gift knitting in December, and they still just like don't sell.
Yeah, yeah. I know, and I've designed patterns too that are specifically designed quick and easy, things. And you're right, yeah, they just don't. it doesn't translate. Because I think too, you said people buying patterns kind of a little bit earlier, or already having them. I also think people are making multiples of the same thing. Like if you find a hat pattern that you love, you might make 4 or 5 of them because they're just easy.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
people might be more likely to be using free patterns for gift knitting.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So December is basically a no-go for us on
Yeah. Yeah.
launching new patterns. I also participate in the Indie Gal, the gift along, and the Fast and Off yarn along. But I similarly mostly see the sales very in November, early December, and then it really kind of just peters off. But January is my highest selling month for patterns.
Generally, yeah, January is pretty good for me and the beginning of spring, um,
Mm.
because I do have some more spring patterns kind of, which is weird to think about. Like I was like, oh yeah, fall is where it's at. No, like I actually do most of my business in spring.
Yeah, that's
uh,
interesting because I know that I have a spike in sales in March and beginning of April. And I always just figured it was because my birthday's in March and my design anniversary is April 1st. So like I have like special promo kind of stuff going on there.
mhm,
Um, so it's really interesting that you also see kind of
yeah,
then.
that's true. But I also do have my birthday sale in April as well. So that could, but I feel like overall, like aside from that, overall, just the day-to-day sales are generally higher than um I kind of also feel like, we were talking about fall being like, oh, you should have pattern releases in fall, but everybody has pattern releases in fall. Like all the big designers too make sure they have something in basically end of August, September, and October. So you end up kind of competing with everyone as well. Yeah. So that's something to think about
Definitely.
too.
Some of my best releases have been early August. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and I find it difficult to really draw absolute conclusions because there are so many factors that go into to
Yeah.
the success. And a launch, like the success of a launch of a pattern is not always indicative of the long-term success. I know that's definitely not true in my business.
No.
uh, and so it's not necessarily the launches that are the most important, but I start to see my sales pick up again really in August and then increase until November, drop off in December, spike to
Yeah.
the highest in January, and then it just kind of like I think decreases from there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
would you say it's like the same for you? Except
I
for
would say
maybe in spring.
mine's a little bit different. I generally starting in January, yeah, January usually starts pretty good. Because we were talking about this yesterday, I feel like they get yarn for Christmas or the holidays and they are okay with spending a little bit of money on themselves now. They're not just thinking about other people. They might have gotten gift cards or things like that. So January is, yeah, generally pretty good as well. And then I kind of go down in February and then March, April, May is usually very good for me. And then June and July are just like absolutely nothing. And then you're right. Yeah, in August it does start to pick up again. And then the big drop in December.
Yeah. And so these are kind of just like general trends for quote unquote average knitting patterns, I guess.
Mhm.
But if you have a theme in your business where you have a lot of summer garments or, summer things, you might be able to help negate the extremely low dip
Yeah,
in the summer. Do you have much for summer knitting?
I do. I do. actually have quite a bit. I have 3 or 4 t-shirt patterns. I have two lightweight, like just throw over oversized cardigan things. And 2 of my all-time most popular patterns are summer patterns. So that's why I do get the boost in the spring that might not be typical for other people. If you're only designing, pullover sweaters, you probably won't get that boost in the springtime like I do. I feel like too, because I do have a lot of sock designs, people tend to switch over to like more portable knitting in the spring and summer. I know I do. I walk around with a pair of socks all the time. So there's that as well. So yeah, it does depend on kind of who you cater to and what your design core is basically. Yeah. What about you? What do you think factors in for you?
Um, well, I think my marketing factors in a lot.
Yeah. That's kind
Uh,
of your strong suit.
so I, especially the last couple of years, my marketing for my design business hasn't been as strong as it used to be because I've been more focused on pattern design circle helping designers and stuff. Uh, but I know that the more that I talk about my patterns with my people, even throughout the summer, the more I sell. I know one year specifically in June, I had a decent spike in sales because I had my designs are tend to be very focused on specific stories and like representative of different things. So I have a collection of patterns that is themed on the state where I grew up. And so that summer I had gone home. It would have been 2021. I was visiting family in Montana and then came back to North Carolina. And so I have the Montana collection and the North Carolina collection. And so like I was just kind of telling the story of being back home, and it reminded me of my patterns and that stuff. And so then I saw a spike in those pattern sales again. So I guess it is also, like uh the Montana collection is all DK weight. They're all like they're meant to be a little bit warmer. They're not summer patterns. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that people don't always buy what's in season. Like if
No,
it's season and
absolutely
they
not.
love it, they're gonna buy it. So
Yeah.
don't be scared to keep talking about the things that you love, even if they feel like they're off season.
Well, and because seasons are different. Like you may have people who follow you, customers in the opposite hemisphere of you, so the seasons are opposite. I see sales from Australia, New Zealand, for my summer patterns right now. And then that flips when it's a summer here, they'll be buying more heavier garments and things like that. So there is a whole demographic of people that is completely opposite to where you are, unless you're like on the equator or something. But
Well, I think it's also important to remember that even in the same hemisphere, the seasons aren't the same. Like
no,
winter there where you live is not going to be the same as winter in the middle of Canada, in the mountains.
no.
And it's not going to be, and both of those are going to be different than winter here in the south. So,
Yeah. Your
uh,
non-winter winters. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like super bulky is just not something I'm inspired to wear when it's 60 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I don't know what that is in
I
Celsius.
don't know what that is either. Warm.
Yes, yes. It's almost summer weather for some Canadians.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of live in like I live in the Pacific Northwest, so it doesn't really get it's wet and it's cold, but it doesn't really get super, super cold. Like we're not the prairies, we don't get a ton of snow. There might be a week or two where it's like minus 10 or 20 Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. um, so yeah, I'm also not super inspired to do bulky weight things or super warm things. but I am more inclined to do warmer things than you might. Yeah. Yeah.
And so really, like, I guess once again, it comes down to how you share things with your audience of
Mm-hmm.
like, I think people put maybe too much pressure on themselves on getting the timing perfect and releasing at the right time or talking about it at the right time and hopping on the right trend. And well, yes, some trends do just take off right away. Uh, I think what's most important is to really be genuine and
Mm-hmm.
excited about what you're sharing and sharing it just in a way that feels good to you, and that will really kind of rub off on your audience. They'll be excited about it too.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel too that there is a trap almost that in our industry we all get caught up in of new release week is pretty much the only time that we talk about patterns or we promote them or post about them or anything is when that, that the silly little week long sale that everyone seems to have. Um, that's what the only time we talk about patterns. That's the only time we share about things. And you know, I always have such a hard time coming up with content for my Instagram or whatever. And it's like I have thousands of photos sitting in Lightroom that I can just pull and post on online. Like you can talk about old things, new things whenever you want or whenever the season is. Like if you release something, say I released a DK weight sweater pattern in July and it tanks, but you can re talk about that in September. Be like, oh yeah, hey, do you remember this that I released in July when it was too hot to wear it? Well, now you can wear it, so you should knit it.
And then you can talk about it again in March when
Yeah,
people are in a different frame of.
yeah,
It's interesting to me also thinking of seasonality, especially because like autumn and spring are essentially the same weather. Like
yeah.
the idea is that they're the in-between seasons. And so
Yeah.
half of the year, theoretically, depending on where you live, half of the year is the same season. And so
Mhm.
it's interesting how there seems to be so much pressure on selling and marketing and all the things in the autumn when is the spring that much different?
Well, and you think too, the average knitter, it's all perception, isn't it? Because the average knitter is not going to knit a sweater in the season that they're in. Or, accessories and smaller things are a little bit different. But like I can bust out a sweater in 6 weeks if I really need to. The average person isn't going to be able to do that. Like, but they pretend. And I do it too.
Yeah, and it's
Because
it's
you're getting excited. You're getting excited about the colder weather. You're getting excited about the warmer weather. So you want to wishful thinking. Basically, what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, and so then those projects, carry in longer into other seasons. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this also lends itself nicely to the conversation of sustainability or intentionality in
Mm-hmm.
making and really promoting that, like just leaning into the making aspect, not the trendy aspect or the seasonal aspect, but the just the art of making. And in our marketing, of course, we can just talk about how good it feels to be making, or what kind of the emotions are, or the comfort, or whatever it is from your design that your audience, your customers can receive by working through it. And those are qualities that probably want year round. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
yeah. So is there anything specific that you do with your strategy, marketing, or launching to align with the seasonality, whether that's summertime, whether that's wintertime, spring, autumn, whatever?
Um, I I do. I kind of I mean, I don't have any hard and fast rules, but I generally do try to be ahead of it a little bit, um, as much as possible without waiting, if that makes any sense.
Mhm, mhm.
So, so what I mean by that is, you know, if I have a really heavyweight sweater and I'm working on it, say now, I'm starting it. And so it's probably not going to be ready to go. I mean, wishful thinking would be February or March. Depending on my mood, I'm probably not going to release that pattern in February or March. Um, but I might if I feel like I'm going to lose excitement about it, because that happens to me very often too. And sometimes just getting it out there is more important than sticking to the seasons. Um, so if it's something that I've got a lot of attention on, you know, I've been sharing my process, I've been talking about it a lot, things like that, I'll release it in February or March if I'm getting good feedback from it. Release it when the excitement hits, because if you wait 6 months to be in the right season, um, people are going to forget about it. So you kind of have to. I play a bit of a balancing game with that. I go a lot by, it's very scientific. I go a lot by feeling and just kind of how I'm feeling in that moment. Some designs, you know, if they're not getting a ton of traction as I'm talking about them, or if I haven't been talking about them a lot to begin with, then I might wait a couple months, um, and then just get into that kind of right season. But it really depends. It depends on the feedback that I'm getting from my customers already. Yeah. How about you? Do you kind of plan things out or?
So the first few years, I definitely planned things out. So I was knitting things in advance. I was designing in advance of the season so that then they'd be ready. Now I kind of follow things on a whim. uh,
Have you
I'm
found that's made a ton of difference in your sales or not really?
when I no, when I'm marketing, not really, because I bring up my old patterns a lot, quote unquote.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Your 6 month
so,
old pattern.
yeah. Um, the not everybody in your audience sees stuff.
Hmm.
There's always new people joining the audience. And there might be people who saw it originally and thought that was super cute, but not something I want to knit right now. And they might want to knit it later. So I tend to do a lot of um, favorite or like featured patterns of the month that then are seasonal, or happy release anniversary kind of thing, throwback to
Cute.
that, or like I shared the context of that trip home and stories around that kind of thing. I also don't put much pressure on my releases anymore. My release schedule is definitely less involved than it used to. Like I'll spread out like the actual marketing and stuff. Like um I released a pattern on Saturday that
Mhm.
I posted in my stories and posted to my Instagram once. And yeah, I intended to send an email and some Instagram posts by now, but I'm not stressed out about the fact that I haven't. Like, I'm able
Mhm.
to give myself a lot more grace there because I'm not super worried about being on hot right now on Ravelry. And I know that even if a release does well, my sales are going to be a lot more down the road. Like the cumulative, cumulative anyway, adding up in the
Yeah.
years. So I'm kind of more now leaning into I want to get this out into the world. I want it to be out there so it's not on my plate just hanging out.
Mhm. Mhm.
But at the same time, when I do think about planning things, like yesterday we were talking about, I have a couple of patterns where I'm like, well, I definitely don't want to release these in December because It's like
Yeah.
worth pushing myself to have them ready by then when I know that they're not going to get a lot of attention anyway.
Yeah. I feel like December is definitely a no-go because waiting a month is not going to be the end of the end of the world in terms of excitement and engagement. But yeah, because we were kind of talking about yesterday. Um, I was talking about not a pattern, but a little course that I wanted to do, and figuring out when would be a good time to do that. It's a little bit of a series, and I was like, oh, do I need to do one now and then maybe pick up again in January, or keep them all together, or go through December? And you had brought up too that like people are busy in December, so they might not even be busy gift knitting, but December is a very busy month for lots and lots of people. Um, so they might just not have time to knit or to take your course or to do your thing. So yeah, you reminded me that December is just a terrible month to do anything. And I feel like that's across the board, unless you're selling something physical. And you're in the States. Honestly, even when we were selling things in Canada, our postage is not the same. So all of our Christmas sales and holiday sales come in November as well, because unless you want to pay triple the shipping, it's not going to get to you by Christmas anyways.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of businesses in general, are like, December's one of my best months of sales and stuff like that, like outside of our industry, just business
Mhm.
stuff, coaching or whatever. And some of that's like people will even buy themselves a course for a Christmas gift or a holiday gift or
Mhm.
things like that. But even social media engagement and things like that always drops around the holidays. Like I think there's just so
Yeah.
much overwhelm when people just have so much going on that like
Yeah.
they don't have time to just be scrolling all the things and buying all the things. And I think it's very intentional buying, which feels a little bit ironic given the whole consumerism aspect, but it's like people are looking for very specific things when they're buying in December.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally.
Now, of course,
And it,
end of November with like Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, that's like a whole another thing where it's
yeah.
almost December, but it's a huge spike in sales for some.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is funny. It's like a line in the sand, December 1st, and everything just like totally peters off. Yeah. And I feel like that could be in part because I don't know about you, but I'm also really busy in December. So I'm not putting as much in
Yes.
as I normally would. So that could be a factor as well. But I feel like because there have been years where I have put in as much and it's still, I feel like it leans more that just that everyone's too busy. And
Same.
it's not just me.
Yeah. But I think with everything, knowing your audience, if you
Yeah.
really want to figure out what people are when people are likely to buy, the seasonality of your own audience, poll them, survey them, ask them when they're knitting their things for winter. If
Mhm.
they're thinking ahead, or if they're waiting until it starts to get cold, or if they just knit the same thing year round, or whatever season you want to ask about. Ask them how they get inspired by like to buy something. Ask them what they're feeling in December in general. Like what are they consuming for content? What are they buying? How are they choosing to make sales and stuff like that? I do know
Yeah.
the very end of December, marketing wise, tends to be better than the rest of the month because now it's finally like a calming. People don't feel as overwhelmed, and they might be doing more relaxing and scrolling and things like that.
Yeah.
And of course they've maybe received their holiday gifts by now, and they're starting to think about the new year, things that they want in the new year, what they want to make for the new year, things like that. And other industries, of course, also there's so much with productivity and planning and self-improvement. All of that stuff, of course, is is huge at the very end of the year, the beginning of
Mhm.
the year. But yeah, basically our advice is don't have high expectations for December. But
No.
January is amazing. I know that the Ravelry sales, like the exports that they create, the whole of
Right.
like
Yeah.
those always show January as their highest month for all patterns in general too. So if you feel
Yeah.
discouraged by sales in December, you're not alone. And I definitely recommend leaning into January. Of course, always do it authentically in a way that feels good and not just doing things for the sake of doing them, but
No.
strategically. That's what we've seen to be helpful.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and in like if you are feeling great in December and you want to put energy into your patterns and into your things like um do it for sure. Absolutely still do it. Um especially if you're like in the mood to schedule posts or like make create content in that way. Um but just schedule things a little bit later, maybe like spread it out a little bit in December and then you have a whole backlog in January when it will really count to maybe stock up on some of that. If you are feeling very energetic in your business, you can, yeah, just pile up and save things for later. That's okay too.
And that's very true, like for the summer months or things like that, when maybe you feel like it's not the ROI on your time and energy in the summer maybe doesn't feel like it's worth it to you. And that's totally okay. That's something you get to define for yourself and your business. But that's a great time to work on back end things, on website stuff, on designing, on writing marketing captions, putting together posts, things like that, that then the ready
Mhm.
things do get busier and more stressful.
Yeah, because that will always come because there's seasonality to business and there's seasonality to people. There's seasonality in your own energies and um if you can pinpoint kind of what months or what times of year you are more energetic, um, then you can kind of tailor that to your business as well and plan the big things, the big brain things, you know, in those times when you know that it's going to happen for you. December energetically for me is not good. So I don't plan things in December.
Yeah.
February and March, spring happens, like maybe not February, March, April. There's spring. Like I feel very energetic in those couple months. So that's when I do a lot of my planning, a lot of my things that seem like really hard work if I'm not in the mood for it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I'm very much the same. And maybe it's the Aries in us or something, but
for me, probably.
December is just always, no matter how much I try to make it not stressful and overwhelming. Like I don't even do a lot of holiday stuff. Like my family, like I'm not used to
Hmm.
a lot of holiday stuff, but it still is just like I think it's this exhaustion from the whole year and overwhelm of wanting to, push everything out last minute and all of these things. What can I accomplish before the end of the year? Whatever. December is just an overwhelming, exhausting month for me.
Yeah.
January is a good month. February is like a tank.
Yeah.
And March is when I'm like ready to just go full sprint
Yeah.
ahead. So March, April, May are probably like my highest energy months of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just have to think of yourself as a bear, you know? You're hibernating in the wintertime and then spring comes and it's like, oh yeah, everything's awesome. Like you wake up, you do it. And then you're kind of like steady through the summer and then fall comes and just like you said, you want to finish up all your last minute things, you want to get everything done and you feel really, you know, you got to get everything in line because you're going to go hibernate in the wintertime. Like
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up because it is such an important thing. And I could record 10 podcast episodes about cycles and seasonality of just our bodies and things like that. But
mhm.
looking into what is actually naturally it's going to be easier to create and to produce when you're excited to do it and you have the energy to do
Yeah.
it. And so leaning into that instead of just forcing ourselves to keep pushing at the same rate all of the time, it's so much healthier for us and
Yeah.
more enjoyable. It helps with burnout, all of the things. So whether you choose to lean into seasonality for selling your patterns or not, lean into the seasonality of your body.
Exactly. Well, and if you know that, if you think ahead a little bit, like I like to plan to have a lot of knitting to do over Christmas, over January, over February. Because I mean, I don't know about where you are, but here it gets dark at 4 in the afternoon. So we have a lot of indoor time as opposed to outdoor time. So I do have a lot more knitting time. I have a lot more time where I can do those things and I like to do those things. So I kind of, yeah, try to plan to have things to work on, do all my designing. And then it's like, all right, for 3 months, I'm just going to knit my samples.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Do you have any last thoughts on seasonality of selling patterns?
Oh, I feel like we covered it. I feel like we ended on a good note.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this has been a really helpful and insightful episode to listen to as well, and gives you some things to think about as you're thinking of seasonality, not only in selling, but being a human and running a business. Wow, thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.